In this conversation, for once, Scott and I are alone with our thoughts. We discuss a new definition of mindset that science is revealing and introduce a fresh set of questions that we'll be asking our guests about how they feel, think and see the world in future shows. Scott gets me to road test these questions and explore a mindset experiment that has yielded benefits in my personal life.
Hey folks, welcome to the Evolving Leader Podcast. It's great that you're here because today it's just John and I. John, it hasn't been just you and I in quite some time, and I'm quite looking forward to having a little interpersonal chat with you.
Yeah, you're right. It's really nice just to be spending some time together.
Yeah. So how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling pretty tired, but also inspired. I got up this morning at 2 a.m. to catch the only flight out of Bordeaux back to London. So, yeah.
Were you drinking Bordeaux?
No, it's dry January, so I was abstemious.
So you were drinking dry wine, drinking Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, there was a pub we were driving past, and it was saying dry January, dry cider, dry wine.
Yeah, it's all interpretation.
Hey, so how are you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling energized from the week. It was a challenging week. We're full on in to the year, and just a lot of fun things to be involved in, and a lot of challenging things, like I said. But feeling really energized about it, and just really optimistic about the year ahead. And like I said, I'm grateful to just have this time with you because for many reasons. One of the reasons I just want to say again that your new book, Leading in a Nonlinear World, is not only incredibly well-researched and well-written, like I've told you before, but I really do think it's truly one of the most important leadership books that anyone can read for the times in which we are living. And by the way, I just saw that it has made it into the top 10 on Amazon, so congratulations, well-deserved.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you for that.
Of course, and I mean every word. And for those of you who haven't listened to Emmett Sinclair and I interview John in depth about that book, I do encourage you to go back and listen to Season 5, Episode 8, which also happens to be the 100th episode of this podcast. So, John, you and I have been talking a bit since then about mindset. Well, we talk about mindset a lot, of course, but mindset being, the ways in which we make sense of the world through what we see, think, and feel. And that has been such a common thread through the interviews we've done these past 2 years with our guests, sometimes very explicitly and sometimes only implicitly, but it's always there. And I think we have a great opportunity on this show to make the implicit explicit.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I mean, if you've been a long-time listener of the show, you'll know that we release little mini episodes called the Vulnerability Interviews, where we ask guests at the end of the interview a few rapid-fire questions without any kind of preparation to get their unguarded responses, and it's not meant to be taken too seriously, and often it's quite funny. But the idea, the serious intent behind it, is to normalize that leaders are willing to show appropriate vulnerability in their leadership. So I think it'd be great now to turn our attention from vulnerability to exploring how each of our guests make sense of the world by building intentional mindsets to confront the kind of challenges in front of them. And we'll pull those things together and release them as separate episodes over time.
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun, and it does still require a bit of vulnerability on the part of the guests, so that part remains. But, for me, I keep coming back to the question of how do we take proper inventory of the mindsets we have, which are constantly changing. How aware are we most of the time of the mindsets that we possess? Because, none of us think that we are in the wrong mindset when we are. Just as when we're not self-aware, we're usually not aware that we're not self-aware. So there have to be practices. There has to be an intentionality around this to cultivate the mindsets that we need to enable us to truly understand what's going on and make sense of the world. So in addition to questions that we'll continue to ask our guests in their interviews relating to their particular expertise, we will broaden the conversation in the topic of sense making, with the definition of our mindset being how we feel, how we see, and how we think. So maybe before we go any farther, John, can you perhaps refresh our understanding of what we mean by feel, think, and see?
Yeah, and I think you've said it, a few different ways in this, which is this revolution in science and psychology and neuroscience that's helping us to understand how we perceive the world, how we make sense of the world, how we use the information from our perception to understand what's going on. That's just taken this massive leap, and it re-energizes the concept of mindset away from just being this narrow definition of how you show up with your attitudes and beliefs to being the basic operating system of perception, how we make sense of the world. And there's two kind of elements to this. One is, well, what are the components of that? And the think, feel, and see is the interplay between physical feelings, physical sensations that enable us to, when we understand them, to have greater situational analysis, awareness of what's going on and make better decisions, how emotions play a part in that, how we use that information from our physical feelings to construct emotions based on what's going on in the situation and what's happened to us in the past and the language we use to construct meaning out of those that information. And then the think part of the equation is the fact that the brain is constantly running on a series of assumptions about the world, and that if we want to evolve, if we want to see more in an uncertain world, we have to constantly challenge our assumptions to find out whether they are based on fact or whether they're based on the past, and bust them so that we can make progress, we can innovate, we can see the world anew, and we can have more options in the world. And then the final piece of this is the frames that we use that allow us to discern, to disregard or ignore what's going on in a situation. Those frames that we hold up that allow us to understand the world, which is often so overwhelming. So when you put those three things together, you kind of go, well, this is my interior world that allows me to make sense of it. And then the second part of the equation is what's the mechanism that allows me to understand that? What's the mechanism that enables me to build and strengthen mindsets? And that is this multi-dimensional form of self-awareness. This is where it gets really exciting, because everybody's got access to this. This is not out of anybody else's reach. It's not dependent on knowledge, intelligence, money, anything. We all have it. We just need to tune into it. And when we start to break it down, realize that there are multiple dimensions. It's not just, what do people think of me, for example? Am I aware of what other people think of me? That's just one layer in this onion. So it starts with a deep sense of understanding what's going on inside our body, the raw form of consciousness that allows us to tune into our body budget and to see how resourced we are. That enables us to make better sense of the next layer up, which is the emotional state that we're in, and how those emotions tell us about how our core needs are being met. And those core needs range from your sense of feeling valued in a situation to a sense of inclusion, a sense of purpose, a sense of clarity, and so on. And those different needs layer up to giving us a really strong understanding of why we're feeling what we're feeling. And the next layer up from that is meta-awareness of our emotions, meta-emotional understanding, which is how we feel about how we're feeling. And then on top of that, the awareness of our assumptions and beliefs, which is metacognition, the ability to analyze the interplay between all of these things. Now, that sounds really complicated when you describe it like that, but actually, the more you do it, the more it just all joins up, and you just see it all as one thing. I'm tired, therefore I'm feeling this. That feeling is making sense of this. That's the assumption I'm making in this moment. And now I've got optionality. I can start to see that and go, yeah, I don't want to feel like that. I don't want to think like that. I want to think like this. So
it is all one thing, and yet it's not talked about as all one thing, which is why I said I think your book is so critically important, because I read books and hear people talk about emotions perhaps in isolation. More often than not in the leadership space, you hear about the thinking piece, right? Like Let's test and bust our assumptions. But the assumptions we have are connected to everything else you've been talking about. They're connected to physical feeling. They're connected to our emotional state. How do we, and I know we talked a little bit about this in our in-depth interview, but you talk about bringing it all together. What are some ways that people can really start to build the connective tissue between all of these things?
I think it starts with the most profound purpose of our bodies, which is to stay alive, which is to be resourced. And I think once we connect with that, it creates a center, a connection with the center. And, there's long ancient traditions of centering practice and so on, and they're very well established and, sort of assimilated into the language and culture of Eastern traditions. And I'm not jumping off from that point, but what it basically means is that I understand where I sit in the world. I understand my relationship between myself and others and so on. So when we become more grounded, more centered in our physical sense of self, that allows us then to build the next layer of connection, which is how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about other people, and the assumptions we're making. So it all starts with that. If that bit is not, if you don't have a strong connection to your physical feelings, it becomes very difficult not to fall prey to intellectual traps, biases, and other traps that the mind misinterprets the world, because the mind is constantly trying to make shortcuts. So when you break that first causal link, then you stand little chance of really making sense of the world accurately.
Mm-hmm. And there are simple practices, I think, that can really help with this. I know for me, for quite some time now, I've been doing 10 minutes a day of mindful meditation, just coming back to the breath. And not only is there a sort of grounding and centering that happens with that, but it's really a practice of learning to focus my attention. And when I can start focusing my attention, I can get better at paying attention to what my physical feelings are, my emotional states are, my thought processes, the kinds of things that might be distracting me. When my mind wanders off and I realize I'm thinking about something that I didn't even realize was weighing on me, but there my head kind of goes, and I have to pull the attention back and keep practicing that focus of attention, while also, maybe bringing to awareness something that's bothering me or distracting me that I wasn't aware of.
And, in all of this, when, I can feel this, my younger self maybe feeling this a little bit, which is this discomfort that we have with the association of doing these things. So for some people, it might feel like New Age drivel. It's like there's nothing here. This is just, like hippies, kind of stuff, or whatever kind of like bias they have towards it. For some people, it might feel like it's just not a silver bullet. It doesn't deliver immediate reality. For some people, and my longtime friend Tony Schwartz, the Energy Project, was brilliant at this, is helping people to recognize that rest in all and renewal in all its forms is seen as the opposite of work. And therefore anything that's associated with closing your eyes or breathing or anything like that is we just don't have permission to give ourselves to do this, because actually what we really need to do is just work harder, because that's the mark of our value. And I love Mark Brackett's book titled Permission to Feel. We need to give ourselves permission to feel in order to be able to get the benefits of this, because this interior set of resources, which all of us have, access to, we need to give ourselves permission in the first place to be able to do it. And then everything else kind of follows from there.
So we've come up with a few questions that we're going to test with our guests and see if it produces the result that we hope for. But I'm thinking that maybe what we could do right now is I could test these questions on you, and we'll see what happens, yeah?
Okay.
I love putting you in the hot seat. It's a great joy of mine.
Remember, this is the 2 a.m. brain here.
All right. Question number 1. What have you learned about your mindset as you've developed as a leader?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned is all of the ways in which I shut down. All the things, the multidimensional things that make me become closed off to people, to situations, to possibilities, to challenging my own assumptions and so on. And I suppose if I had a mantra now, it's kind of stay open. And that doesn't actually solve the problem, but what it is the kind of awareness piece, which is if you want to stay open, where have you become closed? Where is your body closing you down? Where is your emotional responses closing you down? Where is the assumptions you're making about what's happening in the situation, about myself, other people, time, all sorts of things? Where is that closing me down? And that's a continuous disruptive thought that I'm trying to have at the back of my mind, because when it's there, it's like having a shrewd internal coach. And it's brilliant.
Have you become more aware of the types of things that shut you down than you used to be? Let me see if your 2 a.m. brain is tired enough to get vulnerable. What are some examples?
Oh, there's so many things. So I think dry January is brilliant because I'm so much more open because I'm sleeping better. There's no kind of the heightened levels of cortisol and stuff like that alcohol creates and so on. And I'm not a Puritan, I don't want to, completely, not have pleasure in my life and those kind of things. But what it does is it says, is the pleasure, cost in the right kilter? When it gets above 20% of what I'm doing, then it turns into a cost. And it's very easy for it to become 30 or 40% of your week or whatever, as an example. And that could be, the wrong
You spend
food.
40% of your week drinking?
No, I don't. 40% of the day, not the night. I'm sleeping then or trying to sleep. No, but what that does is it's very deceptive in the sense that the feeling, the depletion reduces your awareness. And so you get into a potential spiral where you become dependent on something, even mildly, to give you some form of recovery. But what it's actually doing is the opposite. It's not recovering you at all. It's reducing your capacity. And therefore your ability to stay open reduces. So these little moments where you kind of you give yourself the chance to eliminate something and say, well, how does it feel when that happens? It's very informative.
That's a great example. So question number 2 is around this idea of frame fixedness. That's what happens when leaders hold up the wrong lenses to a situation. When and where have you seen this in others or yourself?
I suppose the worst frame that you can bring into a situation is some form of I know best. I've got the answer. I've been here before. And what that does is, regardless of, you're basically looking for information, for the responses of others to feed into what your expectation is in that situation. So if it's fine if you're getting what you want. People are saying things and giving you answers and outputs that conform into the fact that you know what you want in that situation. Everything else then gets eliminated if you hold this frame too rigidly, and you don't hear counter ideas, you don't hear deviation from what you're expecting, and therefore that shuts out when mistakes are being made, because people then don't want to tell you that, and so on. So the worst kind of frame is I know best. I know what's going to happen. I know what the answer is. I stop thinking when that happens, because I'm filling in the gaps. I'm anticipating that you're going to tell me something I know already. I'm anticipating that you're wrong. I'm anticipating that you're not going to give me what I need. And all of that just shuts you down. So that frame fixedness, which starts from probably a good place, which is have some expertise in this area, or I have some experience in this area, and so on, and you bring that to the front of your mind, it can actually just eliminate your ability to actually see what's really going on and to see the potential of the contribution of others.
And I think there's probably several, but there are two great temptations that I think come to mind when I think about leaders who may do this. One is that, if they hold that frame up that you're talking about, this I know, could give them a false sense of having control. And then the other one is that I think many times leaders are under the assumption that they're paid to know everything. So even when they don't, there's not a shared discovery approach for many. They double down on limited information, past experience, things that may not be anywhere near relevant to what's going on today.
Yeah, I mean, the first point is a really great one, because that sense of I know, what you're trying to do in that moment is to almost eliminate risk by narrowing down what you know and what you think is going to happen down to your perspective. So you're trying to sort of, make it about you and making sure that you're taking control of this. And at the same time, what you're doing is you're eliminating the control of other people, the influence and contribution of other people, and that diminishes their ownership over time. And you're standing on your own. You become an island in that moment.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. All right. Question number 3. Can you recall any situations in your career where you and others made significant breakthroughs by challenging fundamental assumptions about what was possible, feasible, or desirable?
So I think in myself, there's a couple of things, but I'll also talk about something that I did with other people collaboratively that has been a real breakthrough. But in myself, I think the work around mindset has been that my needs and all my needs can be met whilst I'm doing the most demanding type of work in one dimension. So if you think about the kind of sacrifice model, if you want to do something really hard, that somehow that means you have to sacrifice other things to get what you want. And of course, there is an element always that you have to make choices in life. But does that mean that to do that, you have to be selfish, that you have to be mean or grumpy because that's going to be, a deficit? So I think switching into an abundance mindset, which asks you to solve in a different way, which is it's not a zero-sum game between I commit over here, but that means I lose over there, or other people lose over there. So that form of thinking, which perhaps my younger self might have seen as a bit of magical thinking, got eliminated when I saw other people doing it in very, very interesting situations like startups and in the kind of Olympic system, where I saw how it could work, and then I started copying some of that stuff, faking it until I could make it. And I hate that phase, but sort of just experimenting with it until I could see how that might work for me, and it did work, and it did yield some pretty incredible experiences for me. And then the way in which I've seen the most profound adoption in the last 2 or 3 years in the work I've been doing is with a company called IMI. And IMI, which I write about in the book, is 140-something years old, industrial area, kind of blue chip in global engineering company, does amazing stuff. But inertia had set into that organization, and its innovation system, whilst it had amazing relationships with its customers, innovation system had stalled and wasn't delivering, and so its new product development had missed its targets for years, and its margins were starting to narrow because it operates in some sunset industries, the coal and gas and oil industries and so on, and it needed to move into the hot areas. And it's very difficult for an organization like that to appear to be innovative and pioneering, primarily because its people see themselves as having produced these incredibly complex, high-quality products that develop over many years, and they do it incrementally. And so we went in to test this abundance concept and said, the biggest frame we're going to hold here is everything can be done 10 times faster than you've ever done it before. We're going to show you how to do that with the forms of disruptive thinking and action. And we did it. And one kind of test of this was it takes the average startup, which has a 98% failure rate in the world. It takes the average successful startup, which you're talking about a fractional percentage of people that make it through, 5 years to earn its first $1 million of new revenue. We said we can do that faster. And we did it across dozens of startups in IMI over the last 4 years, on an average of 18 months.
That's awesome. All right, question number 4. You've talked quite a bit about this already, but what is the primary way you tune into your body to determine what's happening?
Well, I mentioned it on the last podcast with start the day with this body scan technique, which is basically tuning into the most kind of fundamental read on my body before the kind of thought processes kick in. You start thinking about the day, thinking about yourself. So this is trying to tap into the raw kind of metabolism and read it, and that starts the day in a completely different state, and connects your body and your mind together in a really powerful way. So that's the first thing. And now what I'm doing, I was inspired by a couple of performance scientists who'd really got amazing results in the Olympics by using micro forms of mindfulness to improve metacognition. I just do it throughout the day now in little 10, 15 second bursts of mindfulness. So for example, if I'm, having a cup of tea or going for a walk, I pay extreme focus on the feeling of the ground on my feet, just for 10 seconds. And just to switch on my interoception, to strengthen that connection between what's going on in my body, how it pulls into my heart and into the insular cortex and the brain. And that is strengthening the, one primary mechanism of your mindset. And the more you do that, the more that becomes a pathway between the body and the mind that is operating, where information is flowing more freely. And I can feel a difference. I feel more connected to myself. I feel more present as a result of it. I feel more alert, and I feel like I'm more aware of what's happening around me as a result. I'm not closed off. I'm not in my head. I'm more open as a result of that.
So same question, but now for your emotions. How do you tune in to really understand what your emotions are telling you?
Yeah, so I think like lots of people, this is an area I really struggled. I mean, because when you ask me the question, how am I feeling? I use the same words. I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm excited, I'm excellent, all that kind of stuff. And that doesn't really tell you very much about how you're actually feeling. Because when you really tune in, and it doesn't take a long time, seconds, but when you really tune in, you go, well, I don't really know how I'm feeling in this moment. Because I might be aware of tiredness or elation or distraction. So those are not physical feelings. Those are all other things. So actually to get to what emotional state I'm in requires more language. So the thing that I have been doing is I've been reading 1 or 2 books that I found really interesting. One is an emotional thesaurus that writers use to kind of just explore the language around emotions and get them to think about using language more accurately. What that has done has really illuminated the paucity of my language, the lack of accuracy, the lack of real understanding. And the more I do it, the better I get at really understanding what I'm feeling. When I get better at understanding what I'm really feeling, then I understand what that's telling me in terms of core needs. And so that's the practice.
Before our next podcast, I want you to get out your emotional thesaurus, and I want you to identify a very granular word. So when I ask you how you're feeling, I'm going to get the depth of truth of what's going on in John.
Okay, I promise to do that next time.
All right, final question. And you've touched on this a bit as well, but of all the mindsets that we build and need, what is the single biggest mindset challenge that you personally struggle with the most?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and it's quite a personal thing. And so
tell us.
So I probably struggle to talk about it in a fully open, transparent way, but I'll have a go. So I think the thing that that is true is that when you work really hard, and when you have periods of time of being quite stimulated, perhaps overstimulated in terms of intellectually, and therefore you're exhausted. So you come home perhaps really tired, but you're wired at the same time. So that tired and wired feeling. And the most expedient way of getting recovery is to have a glass of wine and watch television or browse on the internet. It's not to do something that gives you any real recovery. And I suppose the breakthrough moment, which was quite a long time ago, was just recognizing that that doesn't actually give me any recovery. What it does is it creates a form of passive experience, which you think is recovery, but mostly what it makes you is bored and anxious. So this ironic thing, you're sitting in front of the television, you're surfing on channels, you're drinking, maybe a glass of wine, and every so often you're so bored you go to the fridge and eat food that you don't want to fill the hole, the gap that provokes in you. And the challenge, so coming back to the challenge is then, to overcome the anxiety and boredom and to actually get real recovery. Because to go straight from tired and wired to going to sleep, for example, or doing exercise, or doing something that might make you feel better about yourself is really difficult because you don't feel like you've got anything in the tank. So the switch then is to start really appreciating and recognizing the value of true kind of transition recovery. What are the things that actually are going to get you to lower your heart rate, lower your cortisol levels and so on sufficiently so that you can get proper recovery, you can enjoy whatever you're doing. And that enjoyment could come from watching a film. But if you're tired and wired and you sit down to watch something that you've been looking forward to and you can't concentrate, that creates this anxiety loop, which means that you don't get to sleep at night. So that's the bit that I've learned about myself, that I am lent into, and I fail at every so often a week. And
every night.
It's a constant. No, not every night. I'm getting better and better at it. And
no, I relate. I relate very much to
so
what you're saying.
That's the thing that I'd say is the biggest mindset challenge. It sounds very trivial, but it's kind of like a core human experience.
Yeah, it's very important. Wow. Well, this kind of became a part 2 to the episode we recorded a few weeks back with you, and I'm glad it did, because I think these are really important questions, and I'm excited to explore these questions with some of our guests as we go forward. John, thank you.
You're welcome, and I really look forward to to turning these questions to our guests and seeing what they make of them. I think they might need a little bit of preparation,
probably.
to
Those are kind of heavy, huh?
Yeah, they are heavy.
Yeah.
But no, wonderful. Thank you for putting me in the hot seat again.
Of course. All right, folks. Until next time, remember, the world is evolving. Are you?